Well, silly them, because really the only way to win D&D is to break the DM. Or break your players, I guess, depending on which seat.
I tell my players that I am not above bribery all the time. And
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. Thank you guys so much for listening in. Today we have a really special guest. We have Matt Traversa. Thank you so much for being here.
absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited for this.
How long have you been DMing?
DMing, I have been DMing on and off. God, I have to do math, and that's not fair.
You're a DM, you're used to it.
Over 15 years.
Oh, wow. You've been DMing for a long time.
Yeah. I started in 3.5. I actually started as a player in 3.5 and was like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing I've ever done. And my first, this is testing my memory, but I believe my first campaign that I ran was The Hallowed King.
Ooh.
I think is what it was called.
I've never heard of that one.
Something.
But I'm a D&D baby, so it doesn't really count for much.
For anyone who knows what I'm talking about that is listening, I'm probably butchering the actual name of it, but it has something to do with the Hallowed King. It was. I know the second adventure in this series was the Spire. That one I know for a fact because it's a very simple name. But it was the first one in that series.
Email at the bottom in the description so everybody can email you the correction.
Oh, awesome. Because, there's not enough of that in the world.
Right. Here comes the internet hate. So you started in 3.5. Which one are you currently playing in or DMing in?
5th edition.
5th edition?
Yes. Yep.
How many different tabletop RPGs have you played?
Ooh, man. Think 7 or 8.
Whoa.
Over my time. Some of them have been really good. Some have been... See, the weird thing with tabletop RPGs is like people always put them in this category of good and bad. Mm-hmm. I've never experienced a bad RPG, just one that wasn't in my wheelhouse.
That's a good outlook on it.
Because like there's some, there's one out there that is expertly written and is a fantastic RPG. It's just not one that's in my wheelhouse because it's very crunchy, very, very rules heavy, but it's also, you progress by failing upwards. It's a zombie survival type game. Ooh. Yeah, it's like post-apocalyptic. It's called Outbreak Undead. It's a fantastic RPG. I encourage anyone who enjoys horror survival to check it out because they actually include a mechanic that works really, really well where you can create yourself in the game. And there's actually rules and mechanics that take into account your own personal knowledge.
That sounds really intense and kind of brain-breaking.
It is super, super intense. If you love intense stuff like that, I highly encourage it. It was a little too much for me just rules-wise to keep track of. I tried as a player and as a game master, it was just a little heavy, but for those who enjoy that stuff, I highly recommend it.
I am terrible at math, and in our campaign, we have somebody who's really good at math, and I just yell at him like, what's 19 plus 3?
We have a few of those around our table, too. It happens to everyone.
I'm like sitting there panicking, like using all of my fingers every time.
Right.
So since you play so many different games, do you prefer homebrew or module?
Homebrew. Absolutely homebrew.
Yeah.
And it's not a knock against modules because I actually just finished running Curse of Strahd. They fought Strahd this past Saturday. We had our final campaign and it was a blast. I love DMing it. I have a great group. My fiance included among them. And so it was a lot of fun. But the reason why I prefer homebrew is because when you're running a module, there's only so much flexibility in story and things that you can do. When you're running a homebrew, your players go completely off the rails. There's nothing stopping you from running with that.
Yes. So I'm currently running Curse of Strahd.
Okay.
But I'm in the very beginning. They're currently escorting Irina to Kresk.
Oh, yes.
And so I'm super in the beginning, but they did just finally get to meet Strahd for the first time. and it was beautiful. I put them in this whole situation where like it didn't matter what they picked, it was wrong. Like there was no right choice. And
Ooh.
then Strahd showed up to like rub whatever choice they made in their faces, like rub salt in the wounds, and it was glorious. So Curse of Strahd is my first campaign, but I think, and I've recently started doing some extras as well, and they're all homebrew, and I think I definitely prefer homebrew. I like to, like, I don't want to have to remember somebody else's work.
Yeah.
Like the castle, there are 76 rooms in that castle.
Yeah, the castle is insane. One thing as a DM who finished running it, 2 points of advice for you. The first one is you may know what I'm talking about, so I don't give too much away in case any of your players are listening. But do you know of the dragon skull?
Yes.
Okay. Do yourself a favor. Plan an encounter for them so that they can get that bonus before getting to the castle. Because the stupid thing is, it does not matter who you are as a player. Once you get to Castle Ravenloft, you are that close to finding Strahd and taking him down. You're not going to stop. So why would you give that benefit? It's the one thing in the campaign I didn't understand, and the module didn't understand. Why would you give that benefit to players, like that quest, that at that point they're not even going to bother completing?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So like my players, they actually pulled the card where they had to go to Argynvostholt for one of the artifacts. So I threw a skeletal dragon at them when they were there.
Ooh.
And that's how they got it.
I'm writing all of these things.
Go for it. Absolutely go for it.
It was,
so, yeah.
I'm definitely trying to change it. I'm using a lot of, like I found some people on YouTube who kind of have modified things, and I'm using most of the stuff that they do because I like it.
Yeah.
Also, then it just kind of takes it away from the book, and it makes it feels like more like my baby and my campaign, less, reading what somebody else wrote. But also, if you improv it, then I don't have to have it 100% planned out. I don't have to know how many mongrel folk are in the next room.
Right.
I can just improv it as I go.
Right. No, absolutely. And you don't have to sit there and also keep track of, because one thing I'm really bad about is if I didn't create the NPC and they wind up traveling with the party, I forget about them. If they're not my NPC, if I did not create it, I always forget they're with them.
Yes, I did that in the first one. They were like, oh, well, what is Father whatever doing this whole time? And I was like, I forgot that he was even there.
Yeah.
He's just staring in awe at what's happening. They don't know. I mean, they probably did, because I'm a terrible liar. I'm the like I'm emotionally ripping them apart, smiling the whole time. I look like a monster.
I mean, that's good. For that campaign, that's good.
So, since you like homebrew more, where do you draw your inspiration from?
Oh, man, so many sources. So many. So, prime example, actually, of where my sources come from. A handful of years ago, I had the opportunity to run I think it was about a 3.5 year long campaign. And it was in a world I completely came up with from the ground up. And I took different pieces of different lore from fantasy novels I've read. So one thing I did do is I took like pieces of different modules and injected them into different missions that they were given, different adventures they were going on.
Ooh.
And so that was like, so the whole overarching campaign that they eventually discovered was that this NPC that they were escorting around at the very beginning, who was just this total pain in the ass to them. And I did it intentionally. Like they hated having to drag this girl around. I'm pretty sure it's the worst 6 months in D&D that they've ever had as far as dealing with this NPC. But once they finally got her to the Smoldering Mountain, which is where the dwarven home was, they find out that she's actually a descendant of one of the original founders of this continent who can speak an archaic language.
Oh.
And I kind of took, it was a Lord of the Rings, Dragonheart, wanting to make a female the hero type of spin I put on it.
Ooh, I like that.
So yeah, I kind of draw from everywhere.
Languages for me tend to be such a pain in the butt. I recently ran a thing where one of the characters was like, well, I made myself where I speak all these languages. I speak 10 languages. And I was like, okay, great. And I was trying to describe this beautiful ruined castle, and I was just trying to like make it look pretty. And I was like, there's all these wonderful hieroglyphs. And he was like, I want to read them. I was like, okay, well, it's a language you don't understand. Okay, I cast comprehend languages. And I was like, they're just meant to be pretty hieroglyphs. What do you want from me?
So I've had players like that. So there's in my 15 years of DMing, one thing I've learned is you're going to encounter all different types of players.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this, and this is actually a lesson I very recently learned. And I'm incredibly grateful that I have the players I have, because I learned from one of them. People generally, when they hear the term min-maxer, it's generally a negative connotation.
Uh-huh.
To any RPG, anything that is role-playing-esque. But that doesn't necessarily inherently mean that they're not going to roleplay, or that they're just going to suck the joy out of the table. And the way you can kind of allow them to be that kind of player, still draw them into the world, and circumvent stuff like that, is using your situation as an example. Is, you're talking about these beautiful hieroglyphics. Well, I cast comprehend languages. Instead of, just saying, well, you can't read it, tell them, well, you cast a spell and it takes effect, and you start to see the hieroglyphics change and manipulate before your eyes. But halfway through the transformation, it just stops. And it's a language, but the spell is trying to help you comprehend it, but it is beyond even the reach of your archaic abilities.
Ooh, that's smart. I pulled some super random cheesy phrase out of my butt, and I was like, rises with the sun and chases the moon. That would have... See, this is why I love doing these interviews. I learn so much.
Like, if you do something like that where you allow them to use that skill, but do it in a narrative way where you say, where like, it's outside of your archaic capabilities, or, if it's a strength check of some sort, it's built in such a way that even an ogre couldn't get through, or like just different things like that, so that they still feel part of the world and like they're using their character's abilities, but they don't feel like you're hindering them, or you're punishing them for min-maxing, essentially.
Do you feel like, out of all of do you have one of those like all-time favorite NPCs?
I do, actually.
Uh-huh.
Well, okay, not an NPC, it's actually a player character. A character that I played that I absolutely fell in love with, and I still bring back as an NPC to this day. He was a kobold storm sorcerer.
Ooh.
His name was Scritch Scratch.
Oh, that's adorable.
He's dumb as a box of rocks. So the thing about kobolds is they don't understand euphemism or metaphor or simile. Like, they're very, very literal. And when I read that, I was like, oh my God, I want to make him a magic user. And the world I was playing in was actually a homebrew world, and it was steampunk.
Okay.
So we used the D&D 5e system and made a steampunk world around it.
Nice.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And the kobolds in that world were basically like Aztecian, and they were very, very much like the God's will type of mentality. So even though he was a sorcerer, he believed his powers came from a deity. And there was one particular event where the cleric was communing with her deity, and she had drawn a circle of symbols and that and sat in it. And I was like, I want to help. And so I started scratching symbols in the ground. My DM had me roll a check. I rolled a natural 1. My modifier is a -2. So it was a -1.
Oh no.
And he's dying laughing, and he just goes, so you basically scratch into the dirt a recipe for roasted chicken.
Those are always my downfall characters. Or like whenever I get to be a player and the DM creates a character that is so terrible, or if they're super ugly, or if they have like just this super weird voice, I love them. I adopt them.
Yes.
I want them to be mine. And it's going to get me in so much trouble because the DMs know, as a person, as Natalie, it is my weakness, and it is going to get my favorite characters killed.
In Curse of Strahd, so we have me playing around Christmas, and I gifted my players each one magical item that was Christmas themed, minor items, or like a wondrous item. And one of them was a snow globe. You have to shake it for a minute, but once you shake it, a cabin pops out. And it is big enough to fit the party. Well, it also comes with a gnome servant named Jinkles.
That's adorable.
And my players fell in love with Jinkles. Anytime shit got really real and really tough, they'd just go in the cabin and talk to him, and they all felt better.
So did you have it kind of work like Mordekainen's Magnificent Mansion?
Yeah. It was kind of the same, except it only lasted 12 hours. Mm-hmm. And once it was used, it couldn't be used for 24 hours.
Oh, so they got to use it like once every day and a half. Oh, it's so cute, though. They basically got a cabin with a little Christmas elf.
Yep.
That's ingenious. So circling back to what you were talking about with the details and describing with the languages, do you ever feel like you get stuck between like personally, I struggle with like I want to make it real. I want to paint a picture for the players to be able to see in their mind. But sometimes I get stuck too much on the little details and I don't do enough of the big details. How do you proportion that out?
So one thing I do is I use a lot of visual aids. I actually use like 3D battle maps, or if it's a very important area, I will have a model of it table. Like, so prime example, I'm currently running the Horde of the Dragon Queen.
Okay.
And I am working on a model of the Hunter's Lodge that they're going to come across once they get, they're following, those who have ran the module understand what I'm talking about. They're following the caravan right now. They're with the caravan heading from Baldur's Gate to Waterdeep.
Ooh.
And once they get past that section, there is the one following the cult, members of the cult, to this old Hunter's Lodge. And I'm actually making a 3D model of it out of foam board, because there's going to be a lot of encounters in there, but it's also a very prominent place. And I want them to be able to physically see it.
So you use that so that way it's less that you have to do describing the room and more you can describe what they're doing.
Right.
Oh, that's so smart. I really like to make props for my...
Me too.
So like I went and got these little vials where I put like Gatorade and like red Gatorade and edible food glitter in it. So it's health potions, and so they can shake them up and like
awesome.
actually, they look so good and they're so easy to make. They look so pretty though. So that way, like they like instead of being like my character does this, they can actually drink the potions. And I like to make the spell scrolls, which is really dumb because then it makes me shed a tear every time they use a spell scroll and they just crumble up all the work that I did.
There is, so we actually, those of us in our group, were rotating DMing as well.
Oh.
So I, like I said, I literally just finished Curse of Strahd. The next DM is actually taking over He's doing like a half homebrew, half module, but he won't tell us which module because we know them all. So it's a half homebrew, half module taking place the moment they leave Barovia. So it's literally with the same characters. I think one person is switching out, but it's with the same characters and just continuing on.
That's really cool. We did a Call of Cthulhu recently, and only one person survived because, it's Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah.
And they're playing again this weekend, and she's going to reuse that character.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which I feel like would just be terrible. That game was ridiculous. I got so scared. I broke a necklace I was wearing. Because it was like set in the 20s, and we all, I don't know if they're all set in the 20s, but ours was set in the 20s. And we all dressed up for it.
Oh, that's so much fun.
It was amazing. We dress up for so many of our games because they're all online, and so it just makes it more fun if you get to dress up. But I had like a string of pearls, and I just shattered the whole thing.
Oh my God.
The DM was so good. He's amazing.
Circling back on real quick, the point I was getting at with that other DM is he actually found artwork for spell scrolls online, and these things are beautiful.
So what are some big player no-nos from you? Like whether it's like cell phones at the table or overly metagaming, like is there like certain things that you're just like, hey man, that's enough?
Yes. So at our table, there are 3 rules, and they're very easy to follow.
Okay.
But you'd be surprised how many people have a hard time following them. But rule number 1 is everyone at the table is equal. We're all here to play. We're all here to have a good time. Everyone is welcome at my table. And if you can't jive with that, then you shouldn't be sitting here. Mm-hmm. Rule number 2 is have fun with it. If something doesn't work out or, a spell goes wrong, that's part of it. D&D is the most fun when shit goes tits up. All right. So that's what it comes down to. So my second rule is just roll with the punches. Don't get hung up on stuff that doesn't work. Don't get mad because the spell didn't work. Roll with it. And my third and ultimate rule is DM's word is final, but always fair. A lot of DMs stop at DM's word is final. I add that addendum to it because, my word is final, but there's times where, as a DM, I've made the mistake and ruled something, and my players will be like, well, hang on. I get that ruling. Here's why I don't agree with it. And they'll bring up a really good point. I'll go, wow, I just almost completely shafted you. Let's fix that.
That's very fair of you to like listen and instead of just being like slam down the gavel.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Because like I'm on both sides of the screen. I'm a player and a DM. And so when it comes down to it, I would want a DM that's willing to hear me out. So I'm going to do the same thing. Like, because there's times where I've been ruled against and just kind of was left sitting there like, well, there's a really good reason why I disagree with this because it's going to completely counteract a whole lot of other things people are doing. But the DM doesn't see it that way because that screen tends to block your quote vision at times.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Especially those who might struggle with, like, it can almost kind of feel like a power trip at times as well.
Yes.
That may sound narcissistic, but I mean, it can be. It can be. So if you don't have that checks and balances kind of thing, it could very easily get out of hand.
Exactly.
That was, luckily I kind of learned by watching Critical Role. That's how I learned how to play D&D. And so, like, I saw the way they questioned and went with things. And
yeah,
it helped me learn that, at least until I could get around other players. Because I didn't play first. I just started DMing.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'm insane.
Yeah, you are. Like, I'm the type of person, I cannot sit there and read a rule book and have it stick. Like, I actually have to play the game and learn as I go. So I had to start as a player. There's no way I could have started as a DM.
Well, I had a group of friends who were like, hey, Natalie, let's play D&D. And I was like, I don't know, man, that sounds kind of nerdy. I don't think so. And then they were like, but it's creative storytelling. And I was like, damn it, I'm in. And then we were looking for a DM, and they had talked about some of the people, and I was like, I just don't really know. I think I might sit it out. And then I was like, well, what if I learned how to DM? And they were like, okay. And so for Christmas, they all pitched in and got me Curse of Strahd, a player's handbook, and the DM guide. And so I spent like 2 months just like nothing but D&D, trying to cram it in my brain to learn how to play before we started our campaign. And and now here I am, like it literally consumes my life. I spend all day getting to interview fantastic DMs. I get to plan this phenomenal campaign with all these other DMs, and it's literally all I do now is D&D.
Yep. That is exactly what happens.
My poor fiance, like when we started, he was like, hey, this might be really, because I don't play video games either. And so he was like, maybe this would be really good for us. Like it could be a thing that we do together. We have a thing. And now it has just taken over everything. And he was like, I didn't expect you to go this far into it. I'm like, well, we're here. So if you could go back in time to baby Matt DM, what piece of advice would you give him?
Oh, man. God, that's a good question.
It's mostly for selfish reasons because I am that baby DM and I need to know.
Oh, no, that's totally fair. If I could only give one piece of advice and then I had to poof out, it would be, regardless of who's at your table, always remember to have fun. Because I've had so many incredibly wonderful positive experiences playing D&D. I have unfortunately also had some really shit experiences playing D&D. And I have walked away from tables before because of, and not for petty reasons. I didn't agree with something the DM said or something, but just because like either it was a really toxic environment or like the DM was very clearly doing some form of gatekeeping, at their table. I've had players that I've had to not so nicely tell them to leave the table for various reasons. Believe it or not, and I did not experience this until about 2-ish years ago, I had a player actually cheat at D&D. I never thought that would cross my path. Like, it blows my mind still because of the way I view D&D, I think is what it comes down to, right? So it's a role-playing game. It's about storytelling. It's about fiction and fantasy and escapism, Okay. This person was legitimately playing it like a board game, like they were trying to win. It was the weirdest thing I had ever experienced in my life. And like I caught him like lying about dice rolls and stuff. Like we're playing at the same table, but he'd roll in a way that I wasn't able to see his dice sometimes. And he would get like really like stop the game and argue with me for 10 minutes when one little thing didn't go his way. And I've never experienced someone like that before. And it really blew my mind.
It sucks the fun out of it.
It does. That's why I would give myself that advice, that no matter who's at the table, remember to always have fun. Because if you remember to have fun, then you're always going to be surrounded by good people.
Well, silly them, because really the only way to win D&D is to break the DM. Or break your players, I guess, depending on which seat.
I tell my players that I am not above bribery all the time. And like, nobody has bought into this yet. They don't understand. I'm actually serious.
One of my DMs just told me that I could bribe her in beer and chocolate. And I was like, but you live on the other side of the country. Going off that, then, what is it about D&D that just constantly brings you back to the table? After 15 years, what is it that keeps bringing you back time and time again?
I absolutely love, adore, cherish, and am obsessed with improv and theater and just creating things. I am a creationist. My true profession is I'm a design engineer by trade. Okay. So like my job is to create things. I did improv theater for better part of 10 years.
Oh.
And just being able to tell these stories and bring them to life and bring these characters to life, and just there's no this is going to sound terrible, bear with me. As a DM, there's no better feeling than when your players get so emotionally attached either to their own characters or NPCs or the world itself that you actually bring out raw and real emotion at the table. There's no better feeling than that. It doesn't matter what the dice rolls are. It doesn't matter what the rules are. You know, that's what keeps bringing me back. You know, the escapism and just, you know, being able to have that creative outlet.
I could not agree with that more. At least for me, it's been completely life-changing.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a surreal, and the fact that it's so real, but it's all pretend at the same time.
Yes.
Like, if any of these characters in any of my campaigns were to die, I would legitimately have to go through a grieving process.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not real. They're pretend.
Right.
But it's so real to us.
It is. It is. I compare it to when you're reading a really, really good book. For me, immediately, the two book series that come to mind when I make this comparison is the Harry Potter series. Mm-hmm. And for those who are into the literature of D&D, R.A. Salvatore's Legend of Drizzt series. When I got into those books, I would read them constantly. And it was like, when I was done and, you know, waiting to get the next book or just waiting to get home at the end of the day to read, because I read these like middle school and high school, it was like being excited to go home. And it was so real that it was like I was excited to watch my favorite TV show or my favorite movie. Mm-hmm. Like you could see it in your mind so vividly. And that's the connection I have to D&D as well.
Do you feel like D&D can be used to help combat like mental health struggles?
100%. 110%. In fact, real talk, I have this tattoo on my wrist for a reason. It is a semicolon for those of you playing the home game.
Yes.
And for those that don't know what that is, the Semicolon Project was, it started off as a social media thing when MySpace was a thing, which was like...
No, don't show how old we are.
All right. I'll just leave it at that. But I think it was like a MySpace thing is where it started, and it just escalated into an actual like foundation. And that whole idea was, you are the author of your own life, and instead of ending that story, take a pause with a period, take a pause with the semicolon. And so like that really spoke to me. And the reason for my semicolon tattoo is I struggle with anxiety and depression. I was very, very fortunate to be part of a youth outreach program. I actually helped start NS from inception to the day it ended, like 6.5 years in Illinois, as part of a wonderful youth outreach program. Met a lot of wonderful kids, and, you know, we all helped each other through all sorts of different things. And gaming in general was a huge outlet for a lot of us, you know, whether it was, you know, board games, D&D, video games, didn't matter. It was how we all connected, and it was a huge outlet and escape for us. And it is a very, very, very real and very tangible aid in helping with that.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. I've definitely, so one of the big things that I love about D&D is, in real life, you get one life to learn all the lessons that you can. But through D&D, you can use all these different characters and almost live all these different lives. And it gives you this possibility to learn so many more lessons, learn how to process emotions, and go through different trials and tribulations to learn how to process things in your own real life.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And not just process things, but it also, like, you can learn really valuable life lessons.
Absolutely.
As well.
I definitely, in some of my characters, have put some of my own insecurities or situations. Last year, I was diagnosed with PTSD. And so I've put those things into my characters to learn different ways of coping. It's easier for me to, for somebody else, like I can talk about a different character going through this. I can talk about somebody else going through it when it's harder for me to talk about myself doing it. So then and then it also gives it a voice. So it's not something that you're hiding. You're not trying to suppress depression or anxiety. You can use these characters to push through that and speak about it in an easier way if it makes you more comfortable. But that way you don't have to feel like you're going through it alone.
Yeah, no, absolutely. 100%. No, that's absolutely, it's a really, really great point. It does give you a voice for those different things that you deal with. I myself played a character that was a Tabaxi rogue who, it was actually during a very, very difficult time in my life. And his struggle in the campaign was he was struggling to walk this path where this evil force was pulling him in one direction, but he had found this group of friends that were pulling him in the other, and it was this constant back and forth. So it was like this dark versus light type of thing. And it helped me out, and it gave me an outlet to play those things out in a healthy manner and find my path.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you were able to use D&D to help you with that.
Yeah, me too.
I think that even if you don't struggle with mental health, then D&D is still there to teach you all of these incredible lessons about inclusivity and and loyalty and family and all these things. I think that D&D makes people better as a person.
Oh, it absolutely does. In fact, there's actually there is, if you look around online, actual like headhunters and stuff like that, if they find out that you play like D&D, some of them, there's actually ways they can take that and incorporate it into your resume and make it. And the way they do it, it's legit though. Like problem solving skills, team building skills, like all these things you would never think of would come from playing a game at a table.
I know a lot of companies use D&D, like they'll do it as like team building exercises.
Yeah.
And they just bring them in and play a one shot. And I think that is genius.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Unfortunately, I work with a bunch of old people, so none of them would want to play, but I have thought about doing that.
I live in South Texas where D&D is still considered witchcraft.
I'm so sorry. Oh, you poor girl.
It's a thing. We have it. It's great.
Oh.
I was actually told when I started making those health potions I was telling you about that I was making potions. I was like, it's Gatorade and glitter. They're like, but it's the thought behind it. I was like, oh.
Oh no.
Yeah, it's fun. I'm in a conservative state.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in North Central Indiana, which is a little better, but there's a long ways to go.
Yeah, I'm over here like on the bars of like the outside, like let me out, or something. Okay, so the last few questions are no longer about Matt the DM.
Oh, okay.
It's more about Matt the person. However, if they bleed together, it's all good. But we don't like to tell you about these beforehand so that you can panic.
Oh, God.
So if you could recommend a book, a TV show, and a movie.
Oh, okay. So book, man, that's because there's a few that come to mind. But if I had to pick one, I actually just recently started reading it. One of my players turned me on to it, actually. It's the book series that the show The Dresden Files was based on.
Okay.
Phenomenal book. The way I love it because the way they approach magic use and the way they describe it and how it interacts with the human body is really neat and is giving me a lot of fuel, not only as a DM, but as a player. If I ever play a magic user, like it's giving me a lot of really cool creative fuel. And it takes place. So basically, it takes place in current day Chicago, and it's this alternate timeline where what would happen if people discovered that, you know, witchcraft and wizardry and demons and everything were real.
Ooh.
And exist in our world.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's really, really good. So it'd have to be my book series.
Okay.
For my TV series, let's make this easier. Give me a genre because there's so many I could recommend.
Let's go with comedy.
Comedy, TV series comedy. I would have to say Family Guy. That show never fails to make me laugh.
I've never seen a single episode.
Oh my god, it is so funny.
I'm weird about comedy. Like I'm a hit or miss when it comes to comedy, and that's just not the kind that does it for me.
That's fair. That is totally fair. Everyone's got their own taste. And so movie too, right?
Yeah, let's go with movie.
Let's see. If I had to recommend a movie, oh man, that's a tough one.
Yeah, it is. That's why we save the hard ones for last.
Yeah. Clearly.
I'll tell you in the beginning and give you the whole interview to think about it, but where's the fun in that?
Right? You know, if I had to pick one movie that I always stop and watch if it's on, is Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah. There's something about that particular one. And I know, like, there's a whole bunch of arguments about which one's the best in the trilogy. And, like, that's not what this is about. There's just something about that movie that every time it's on, I stop and watch it.
I have to rewatch Lord of the Rings as an adult because I didn't like it. It scared me as a kid. The
Oh, yeah.
Gollum scared the bejesus out of me as a kid.
Aww.
I would be terrified. Like he got in my head, and I was like, "He's in the corner of my room. He's in the corner of my room. He's in the corner of my room." And so I did not finish it. I've never finished it. So, but I want to rewatch it. Like I'm a grown up now. It should be just. And everybody says it's so good, and I get so much crap for not watching it. So it is like at the top of my to watch list.
Okay.
To watch the Lord of the Rings series because I'm a grown up and I can do it.
Okay.
All right, last question. This is the most important.
Oh boy.
Dirty Dancing or Footloose?
Oh, Dirty Dancing.
Yes.
Absolutely. I love Kevin Bacon. There's something about the movie Footloose though that just like it just gets so boring for me, and it just I don't know. I can't do it. I think, and one of the like weirdest scenes in that movie for me is the angry dancing through the empty warehouse. Like, I totally get it. I get that like he's emotional and everything, but there was something about the cinematography in that scene that just made it weird.
It's kind of like there was a recent. It's Tangled. It's the Disney movie Tangled, and it was when Disney kind of started to break that fourth wall, and they were like, how does everybody know the lyrics to this song? And it's kind of like in that movie, like, how do you just randomly know where the chain's hanging that you can swing off of, and it's not going to give underneath your weight?
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a weird-ish, but I'm a musical fan, so.
So am I.
I should have a better like standard for musicals, but I don't, and I'm just. Oh, I'm in. I love it. I don't even care.
So you're just like you're basically just like a musical trash panda. You'll consume anything that's musical.
Yes. 100%. What like my favorite is this super weird one. It's called Repo the Generic Opera.
Yes.
It's so fucking weird, but I love it so much.
If you like Repo the Generic Opera, have you seen oh my god, The Devil's Carnival?
I have not, and it is now on my list.
There's two. There's The Devil's Carnival, and then The Devil's Carnival something, or all of a sudden I can't remember the name of the sequel. Emily Autumn, I know for a fact, did and was in the first one. I think she did this. I know she did the second one. I don't know if she was in it. But it's got so many people in it that like would blow your mind. You ever watch the show Sons of Anarchy?
Yes.
Okay. Captain Unser? The cop? The old guy?
Yes.
Yeah. He's in that and apparently can sing.
I wrote it down, but now I started.
Yeah, like it's so good. So good. And then the lead singer from Five Finger Death Punch has a solo in the first one.
Ugh, it sounds so good.
It is. It absolutely is. Watch it. It's amazing.
Yeah, definitely 100%. I'm just a musical trash panda. I just want to watch it all. But I don't just like to watch it. I like to watch it and then learn it. And then when nobody's home and I'm all alone, I replay it and sing it all with it.
Yes. I am the same.
I'm a grown up and I can.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for doing this interview, Matt. It's been so much fun.
You are welcome. Thank you. I've had a blast.
I love doing these interviews so much. It never fails to be interesting. We get different tips every time. Everybody has a different outlook, which is why we really wanted to start doing this, because like you can go online and look up, new DM I'm a new DM. What can I do? Give me some tips. And you always get the same tips and you get the same people, which is phenomenal. Matthew Mercer is amazing for a reason. Colville is incredible for a reason. But, what about the guy who's been DMing for 15 plus years, you have 15 years of experience. And so we wanted to be able to find something where it's, the new DM can listen to these and be like, oh, these are all actually really different than what the typical people, what you can read online. Or if it's the old DM who just kind of wants to mix up their game, something that is different. And teams work really freaking hard on their stuff. Like,
yes.
So much work goes into them. So thank you so much for doing this. You can watch Clash of Quests every Saturday at 1900 UTC to see 6 Forever DMs flounder and make D&D so hard and feel all of the emotions, because I have a feeling I'm gonna cry in an episode soon. So
oh no.
Thank you guys so much. Have a good night, morning, day, wherever you are. And don't forget, Nat 1s are just as fun as Nat 20s.